Thank you, Jeff. And Mobilize News and Free Speech TV. It's a great opportunity that we uh, that we here in the front line in Brazil have in order to try to explain a different perspective of what's going on. The question is decentralization. We have a lot of decentralization going on. In fact, we won't get into the history, but it's an indigenous country. We have the slave enclaves that are a these are isolated communities that are decentralized. But it's difficult to explain decentralization. So I like to break it down by nuts and bolts, reverse engineer it, so to speak, because the human psyche is resistant to change, and we have been in modern society. And it was before the Industrial Revolution. It's not what the academics say that it was after the Industrial Revolution, but we have gotten too used, too programmed, and so decentralization is hard to explain, as I said. So let me break down centralization, and in future podcasts we can get into history because history is important. How modern society has got us in this situation, grave situation that we are in today, and it's because of the inefficiency, corruption of centralization. So let's do that. Let's break it down. Let's break it down in kind of like pros or cons. So centralization, okay? The media, the media. Media is corporate. The content is corporate controlled. We know that, okay? And government has a lot of influence in what we see in centralized corporate media. So in decentralization, it's independent and free media, totally free from special interest groups, and more difficult to censor. And from what I've been told by experts, it's almost impossible to control a decentralized digital media. So we are truth seekers and looking for solutions. And the corporate media is not, they want us in a centralized top-bottom system. So we're not going to get it from centralized media. Okay, agriculture. Centralized agriculture is industrialized, petrochemicals, Roundup from Monsanto / Bayer because they merged. Corporations are merging to monopolize. So agricultural is extremely important that we decentralize. Agriculture and decentralization is occupy the natural resources. There are forces in the world, corporate, and even the UN, WEF, that are very interested because capitalism seems to be on crutches right now, and we have a finite planet, and capitalism needs infinite natural resources. So they want to control the rural areas, so that's important. It's important also to save the family farmers. We don't have that here in Brazil yet, but we have right now, at present, the Europe. I think the Germans and the French may follow suit, but there's farmer protests, and in the U.S., farmers are totally controlled by Monsanto, Bayer, even the seeds, GMO. And the family farmer was practically eliminated decades ago. So that's important. Seeds are important because in a decentralized community, rural community, for example, we still have seeds. In the European Union, they want to pass legislation to prohibit of natural organic seeds. And of course, behind those legislations are these corporate government alliances wanting to control what people eat. So that's important. In a decentralized agricultural community, there's self-reliance and total freedom from government and that corporate control. Land. Okay, it's happening. Gates, Bezos, Bushes, just to give three examples, and only to give examples in America. But land is becoming one of the richest, most important commodities. And as I said before, elite corporate wants to take over land for the natural resources, and also because they want to control our foods. I mean, there's our food today is controlled by General Foods. Very few corporations. Very few corporations. General Food, Nestle's. It's it's we got to get away from this corporate control, and that's what happens with centralized agriculture. But no, with in a decentralized, we occupy the natural resources, as I said before, and protect the natural farmers. And we really do need to occupy because land is turning into. There's a reason why elite billionaires and elite billion and the corporations they control want to control land, and it's because they want to control our food. They want to control how we eat. I mean, there's talk about synthetic food. There's talk about insects, eating insects, and that's not the way we want to go. Land is turning into, perhaps soon will become one of the most precious commodities, and it's for that reason. For what's on top of it, earth, the soil, and what's on the below, minerals. Water. Okay, in a centralized environment, water is sold to us, which is ridiculous. Clean water is a human right. I learned that through working with human rights. And also in cities, waters are contaminated. Chlorine is very bad for Hashimoto, for example, and many other causes many other diseases. The chlorine, and but there's arsenic. There's just so much pollutions in water, even if it's processed in the city, and they have to charge for it because they go through the processing. In a decentralized community, the water's free and it's clean, and that's health. Okay. Food, we spoke about that already. So, genetic and centralized environments, it's genetically modified, it's monopolized, so it's expensive, and it's getting more and more expensive as we see it happening now. I've been lecturing this for decades about this inflation, about the possibility of war. War is always inflationary, and we're going through that now. In a decentralized situation, food is cheap. It's real food. It's not fake food. It's nutritious. Our health is better. Our immune system is better. They're talking about world famine now, and famine. After famine comes bad health, bad immune systems. After with bad immune systems, viruses and pandemics will flourish. That's historical. Okay? So we need to stay healthy with everything that's going on in the world. And decentralization helps with that. Building homes in buildings. Modern construction is really a scam. Okay, we've been sold the idea that we have to use concrete and steel and nails and all that. I mean, in rural communities, there's fantastic mud houses, and these, for example, I'm in a mining area, and all when China was building these mega smart cities, which we can talk on another podcast. they bought all the iron ore of these mining companies, and they're really destroying the landscape here with the extraction of it. So that's understandable, but we really have to stop living on top of each other. And smart cities aren't really smart. The building in more rural and decentralized communities uses local materials, so there's less carbon footprint, and we must reverse we must reverse the insanity of cities. There's a great history about how these cities came about, and we should talk about it in further podcasts. Homes in rural areas can be built by wood that you reforest, mud, without using any metals. And there is I work with a scientist, great scientist, Dan Winter, and he explains how we should not live inside concrete and houses that use metal. So there's great bioconstruction methodologies. Politics. In a centralized situation, politicians, they're controlled by lobbies. And they also have no shame because they don't know their constituents personally. In a decentralized community, local, you establish local co-ops in committees, and the people know each other. They know each other well, so they know what their virtues are. They know what they're good at. They know what their talents are. So a committee can be divided with specialties and professions, and the best treasurer, the best word of mathematics is the treasurer, and there's a shame factor that's a very important when you're not being governed by someone in a centralized in Washington D.C. or Rome or Paris. Localization, there's a shame factor because people know each other well. Security. Okay, centralization, much violence. The police is controlled and commanded from top bottom via hierarchy. Whereas in a decentralized situation, I'm talking, these could be cities too, but in neighborhoods where everybody knows each other, it's easier to create security, to mitigate conflicts, and not be reliant on police. There are ways that committees and through self governance, there are ways to not be dependent from police in order to mitigate and control and avoid crimes. In many ways. So, energy, very important. Coal in centralization environments. They use coal, petroleum, a central grid, which is ridiculous because the grid could be thousands of miles away, and they transport it all the way over. But they use a lot of coal. They use a lot of petroleum. But even if it's hydro, even if it's renewable energy, there's no reason to transport it so far. In a decentralized situation, every community, every region can produce sun energy, wind, even hydro, small hydroelectric dams. And I'm actually developing a human power for these communities, which is like a gym. And because every gym, every moving part, every time you ride a bicycle or one of those treadmills, we can multiply energy. So I'm actually designing a system where we can recharge batteries, not only recharge batteries, but connect like a bicycle to a mill. So these farming communities can make flour out of corn, grind it while one is doing exercise. Now, money, okay? Everybody believes that you need money for everything, and and we certainly do not need centralized money. In centralized situations, money is controlled by central banks, okay? And we must talk about that in future podcasts because it's fake money, it's quantitative easing, has no commodity backing. In the U.S., for example, since 1971. Other countries are back on the gold standard, but there are so many other ways to trade. And decentralized communities, for example, or when I say communities, I mean in the city also, a region, geographical area can barter. Okay, it's easier if you're growing your own food, and which is a basic need. Seeds. The Aztec had a great civilization. When Europe was in the Dark Ages, the Aztec civilization was very, very advanced. And what they used was cocoa beans, cocoa seeds. And it was quite efficient. It was quite efficient. So seeds, organic seeds, for all the reasons I mentioned before, are a great way to for trading for other products because they're becoming very rare. They're creating laws against anything that's not GMO, and that's not right. There's also a way to create local money. Okay, you create local money, and you create some sort of code that only one person in the committee knows, and that code is created, and that's it. It's just paper. It's paper with better faith because you know who you are trading with. So there's impossibility of crimes or counterfeit. But it's real good faith money, not the type that we're getting from the central banks, which is about, in my opinion, about to totally crash and come down. At least the countries that don't have a commodity backing it. And then, of course, there's crypto, which is a revolutionary currency, and communities can create their own crypto. It's not that difficult. There are platforms already available where one can do that. And one thing that I see with crypto that I am totally suspect about is that there's no commodity backing it. But I have an idea of creating a crypto that's backed by land, that's backed by forests, that's backed by seeds. And if a crypto is created and then you join, you network, we're going to be talking in future podcasts about a software, an app that will join all these communities, millions of them. They're growing exponentially here in the region that I'm in, the heart of Brazil. But they are growing. There's exodus from the city actually happening. So a software that can unite all of these communities around the world can create millions of users, share solutions, share seeds, bartering system, and unite a cryptocurrency that's backed by something real, by a real commodity that is worth something. And it's not gold anymore. It's not silver anymore. It's actually land, is seeds, and and something of confidence, something honest. So I believe we're out of time for now. This is a 15-minute or 20-minute podcast, and I'll get more into the nuts and bolts. That's of the history, why we got into this situation, why centralization is so wrong, and then we'll go forward in other podcasts. Thank you very much.